Now, in my opinion, and I stand by this, Ghostbusters is possibly one of the best movies ever made. It's just entertaining throughout. The cast, which is now iconic, were the perfect mix, and they all bounce off each other perfectly. The runtime is not too long and not too short, and the story is not overly complicated and easy to follow, and it flows beautifully. And in my opinion, this movie has a perfect start, middle and end. The perfect three-part act. The movie follows Ray Stantz, played by Dan Aykroyd, Egon Spengler, played by Harold Ramis, and Peter Venkman, played by Bill Murray. Three parapsychologists who decide to go into business for themselves after discovering that New York seems to be infested with ghosts. They call themselves the Ghostbusters, and from the Firehouse HQ they offer to come and bust any ghosts that may be haunting your premises, of course for a price. And eventually they hire the fourth member of the team, Winston, played by Ernie Hudson. The way I've always thought of Ghostbusters is like a pest control business, but for ghosts.
No, we're exterminators. Somebody saw a cockroach up on 12.
That's gotta be some cockroach.
Bite your head off, man.
And it's a truly original concept that I just think works perfectly. Now, one of the first customers to come to the Ghostbusters is Dana Barrett, played by Sigourney Weaver, who at this point in her career had starred in Alien in 1979, but had not yet starred in such iconic movies such as Aliens, Gorillas in the Mist and Working Girl, but she was still pretty famous. And her character of Dana Barrett is experiencing paranormal activity in her apartment and seeks the help of the Ghostbusters. And it turns out that Dana Barrett's apartment building was built by a guy named Ivo Shandor, who in life was an evil god worshipper, worshipping a god that went by the name of Gozar. And the building itself can resurrect the evil Gozar and bring ahead the end of the world. Now, originally, Dan Aykroyd had planned this movie for himself and John Belushi, who had already had success with the Blues Brothers. And Dan Aykroyd already knew a little bit about paranormal activity from his father, who had actually written books on the subject, and his father's passion for the unexplained rubbed off onto Dan Aykroyd, who has often stated in interviews that he is a believer in ghosts and UFOs and such. Also, Aykroyd's first idea for the Ghostbusters movie, which was at the time titled Ghost Smashers, saw the movie take place in the future. And the Ghost Smashers resembled a SWAT team that travelled through time and dimensions busting or mashing ghosts and aliens and such. And when this was pitched to Ivan Reitman, he thought it was a little bit complicated and too ambitious for a movie that hadn't yet been given a budget, and that was probably going to be given a very small budget. So instead, the concept was changed slightly, and the new stomping ground was a modern day New York City, and the story now revolved around a surge of ghostly happenings and a group of guys who go into business for themselves to capture these ghosts, set in a more grounded reality. And I think that sometimes simplicity is for the best, and this movie is a prime example of that. The simplicity makes it a better movie. And did you know that the movie's title Ghostbusters was not a sure thing? This was down to a TV show from 1975 that was also called Ghostbusters, and for a while the rights for the name were unattainable. But filming went on regardless, and anytime the actors mentioned the business name of Ghostbusters, they also did a few more takes with different names like Ghost Smashers and Ghost Breakers, just in case they could not get the Ghostbusters rights. But as we all know, it all worked out fine.
Ghostbusters! Ghost Stoppers!
Blasters?
Blasters. Ghost Blasters!
Now, that same TV show from 1975 also had a spin-off cartoon series called Ghostbusters. So eventually, when it was time to make a cartoon series featuring Peter, Egon, Ray and Winston, it was decided the name of the show should be The Real Ghostbusters to avoid any kind of confusion. As we all know now, sadly John Belushi passed away as the script was being written, and Bill Murray was brought in to play Venkman, who was absolutely brilliant in this role, and according to some, he is just playing Bill Murray. It's hard to imagine this movie without Bill Murray playing Peter Venkman. But in a way, John Belushi did still make it into the movie, as Slimer was said to be based on the appearance of John Belushi. Although, according to the sculptor of the Slimer model, the puppet had already been sculpted, and he simply passed it off as Belushi's lookalike, and the studio simply bought it. But regardless, Slimer is intended to be Belushi in spirit, despite originally being named Onion Head. Another character that was recast was Winston, and the part was originally offered to Eddie Murphy, who passed on the offer, and the role went to Ernie Hudson, and as a result, certain scenes were cut from the movie. This is probably because Ernie Hudson didn't have the same star power that Eddie Murphy had back in 1984 with his appearance on Saturday Night Live. Originally, Winston was supposed to be slimed by Slimer in the hotel, not Venkman, but when Eddie Murphy refused the role, the script was altered, bringing in Winston later on in the movie. It did seem that Ernie Hudson was a little unfairly treated in the first movie, but he simply didn't have the star power that Eddie Murphy had way back in 1984, so it kind of makes sense that some of his scenes were cut. But in the second movie, Winston did get a slightly bigger part, although there were still scenes where he just wasn't present. I think what also makes this movie great was the practical effects, and I'm a big fan of practical effects, but let's face it, in the 80s, there wasn't many other options, but it does go in the movie's favour. Even after all these years, those practical effects still stand up. Admittedly, not all of the effects. The scenes with the terror dogs look a little bit janky now, as it was done with stop motion. But the close-up shots of the terror dog puppets, I honestly do think look amazing. But most of the practical effects in this movie are just brilliant. The library ghost, for example, was played by a real actress, and then it transitions into the horrific puppet perfectly, and it's terrifying. And then of course we have the puppet of Slimer, which is out of this world, which actually had a puppeteer inside the big green monstrosity wearing long sleeve green gloves. And the way they layer that into the movie is just brilliant and really effective. And of course there's so many other spooks that appear towards the end of the movie, such as a zombie taxi driver and multiple other ghosts that were just utilised perfectly. And I think one of the best special effects in this movie was of course the Marshmallow Man, who walks down the streets of New York towards the end of the movie. And of course, to achieve this shot, it was just a man in a suit walking down a miniature model of New York, with big toy car models on the road, and everything was done to scale, and the attention to detail was just amazing. And I also believe that the creation of the Marshmallow Man is a character that has now gone down in pop culture history. As a kid, I absolutely loved this scene, and as an adult, I still do, and I love the character of the Marshmallow Man. I remember being so excited when the Marshmallow Man appeared in the animated series when I was a kid. And then in my adult life, I was overjoyed to actually go up against him in the PS3 game, which also could be considered as the third installment in the franchise, as the story was written by Dan Aykroyd and all the cast members reprised their roles for the voice acting. And it's actually a pretty good story to follow as you bust some ghosts in an exciting game what makes you feel like you're in the Ghostbusters world. And you know what, I find it really hard to imagine this movie and the cartoon without that now iconic song and theme to the cartoon show, Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters! This song was written by Ray Parker Jr., and I honestly believe that the song was responsible for a percentage of this movie's success. It all goes hand in hand. When you think of Ghostbusters, you think of this song. And I remember as a kid growing up in the 80s, this song was just unavoidable. It was on the TV, especially on the animated TV show. It was played at Halloween, it was played at birthday parties, it was unescapable, and every time you just had to sing along. This movie was so impactful on me as a kid and many other kids. Ghostbusters were everywhere in the 80s. The animated TV show was on constantly. The toys filled every peg in the toy shops. There were books, t-shirts, comics. It was a massive part of the 80s and definitely had staying power as it never really went away. In the 90s, it got a new cartoon named The Extreme Ghostbusters, which carried on the adventures with a new team. And then IDW Comics gave the Ghostbusters a resurgence with a great comic run that is still going strong to this very day. And of course, we had many other movies like Answer the Call, which wasn't great. And then there's Afterlife, which I thought was pretty good, and Frozen Empire, which I found pretty poor. But the main reason I think that these movies are quite poor is simply because they don't star the Ghostbusters themselves, Peter, Ray, Egon and Winston, and cameos just don't count. For me, the original movie will always be the best and it's hard to beat. It's just a classic that has stood the test of time, and like I said, the effects may be dated in parts, but I think it adds to the charm. We now live in a world where Hollywood is always trying to reignite old movies instead of coming up with something new and fresh, like Ghostbusters was back in the 80s. And I believe that if they keep insisting that they need to bring back Ghostbusters for a new audience, I think they have three options that may prove successful. Option 1 is a new animated series featuring the original Ghostbusters, or a live-action TV series, again with the original Ghostbusters characters. Or a brand new movie that is totally revamped, but once again featuring those original 4 characters, recast with a fresh set of actors. I honestly think that is the best way to go. Instead of carrying on the original universe, create a brand new movie With the same characters, recast for a modern day, revamp it, reboot it from the beginning, don't keep carrying it on. We will always have the original Ghostbusters movie, we will always have the sequel with the best cast possible, but now I think it's probably time to move on. And maybe, just maybe, a new generation of kids will scream at the TV screen, who you gonna call?
Ghostbusters!